Genesis chapter 32. And this is kind of the culmination of one of the most important segments of Scripture, at least for the Jew, and that is their identity as the children of Israel. Up until this time, we've known Jacob as Jacob. So you don't have a nation of Jacob in the Middle East. You have a nation of Israel. So we need to transfer from just being Jacob to having another identity, which will eventually be the identity of the Jewish people. So chapter 32, beginning in verse 1, we're just going to chop it up quite a bit and look at little segments, verses 1 and 2 to start with. Jacob also went on his way. That's from Mizpah. He and Laban have had their meeting together, and Laban and he have piled up the pile of rocks and made a monument. You don't go past this monument to do me harm. I won't go past this monument to do you harm. He also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. Mahanaim. I did a lot of reading on that subject this week. We're going to run into the idea again a little bit later. But the word Mahanaim means two camps. And I'm not completely sure what two camps we're talking about, but as we go through, we'll kind of see. At this point, the fact that there is a camp of angels at the border to Canaan is interesting. I was reading a fellow named John Sailhamer. He's wrote Genesis for the Expositor's Bible Commentary. He says, think back to the Garden of Eden. When God runs Adam and Eve out of the garden, he puts up a guard. And so you cannot get back into the garden because there's an angel guarding the way to the tree of life. He believed that the idea of the angels camped out in Canaan was that they were guarding the way back, and that somehow Jacob had to be worthy to get back past these angels who were guarding the entrance back into the land of Canaan. I'm not sure that's where I ended up, but I found that interpretation interesting. Later on, the more famous encounter with angels, we'll find Jacob wrestling with an angel. Why was he wrestling with the angel, and was this angel part of that group that was camped out? Ran across another interpretation that I like better, and that is that these angels were there not to protect Canaan from Jacob, but to protect Jacob from anybody else. That God had sent a group of his own angels to make sure that they were, that he and his family were safe. When you look at some of the other translations, this is the camp of God, or this is the host of God who are camped. There could have been, might have been, according to old Jewish sources, as many as 60,000 to 120,000 angels camped out. It's hard for me to imagine. When I think about angels being in heaven. That's where they're supposed to be. But when you read the Old Testament, angels are often connected with things that are going on in the human world. Think about Abraham, where they have three men who show up. Two of them end up being angels. One of them ends up being the Lord. So they seem to have different appearances. In this particular passage, they seem to have appeared as an army camped out somewhere near the borders of the land of Canaan. Right? Take a look at verse 3. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seer, the country of Edom. And by the way, Edom is Esau's nickname, right? It means red. And later on in the Old Testament, you'll run into the Edomites, kind of south and east of the land of Israel is where they settled. So he's already living there with his possessions. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my brother Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my Lord that I may find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming out to meet you, and has 400 men with him. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, the flocks and the herds and the camels as well, because he thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, then the group that is left may escape. This is another possible interpretation of the term Mahanaim. It could have been two camps of angels. It could have been a camp of angels and the camp of Jacob's family. Or if you take this passage, it could have been the two camps of Jacob's family as they split up, each one guarded by a group of angels. So he divides everybody apart just in case Esau decides to attack. Now, he's got, I guess, decent reason to believe that Esau might, because the last time we saw Esau was wanting to kill him. In fact, he took a vow. As soon as Daddy is dead and I bury Daddy, then I'm going to kill Jacob. So he had everything in mind to do that. And oddly enough, we've gone through about 21 years since that occasion when Jacob ran away to Padan Aram. Isaac's still alive. Right? Last time we saw Isaac, he seemed like he was taking his last breath. He was at the end of the rope. But he's still alive. The two brothers will actually together bury Isaac when he dies. And Esau does not follow through on his threats for killing him. But look back at chapter 27, Genesis 27, and verse 38. Genesis 27 and 38. You remember that Jacob stole the blessing, right? So he gets the good blessing. And then in verse 38, Esau shows up and wants his own blessing. Let's see. Let's just go down to 30. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too had prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. And he said, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my game so that you can give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm your son. I'm your firstborn, Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said, "Bless me too, my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he's taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." And he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessings for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, have made all of his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. What can I possibly do for you?" Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." Esau wept aloud, so his father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off of your neck." What is he going to live by? The sword. Right? You will live by the sword. So Esau is, at least as part of his blessing, was that he was going to be a warrior. So he's got 400 guys with him, and he's on his way to find Jacob. What do we think is going to happen? Right? Exactly what Jacob thought, right? Esau's going to come kill me. He's bringing 400 guys with him. And so he goes into panic mode. It seems that he doesn't put together the idea that there's a bunch of angels over here camped out around me and I'm safe as long as God's got me. He doesn't put those, A and B together. He's afraid, and so he begins to make preparations in case Esau comes to get him. So he splits the family in half. He doesn't have any hope for victory. You remember when he left, he's the head of the family when he leaves. He's been given the family blessing when he leaves. But he's so afraid of Esau that he doesn't stay. Esau is only a few minutes older than Jacob. we're not talking about a big brother in the sense of Esau was 10 years older and grew up bigger and badder, and Jacob was the little bitty. No, but Jacob was the one that stayed in the tents, and Esau was the big hunter that went out and brought in the food. So Jacob is still seeing his brother as they were in their youth, and he's still scared of him and doesn't want to anger him in any way. All right, down to verse 9. So Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. So now, instead of being a negative, I'm so scared I split up all my stuff, he's saying, Lord, when I first started out, I didn't have anything, and now I've got so much that I can divide it in half, hoping to save half of it. So again, we get that idea of two camps. The Mahanaim, there's two different entities here. And so maybe he's talking about the fact that he's so blessed that he has enough for two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and I will make your descendants like the sands of the sea, which cannot be counted. I find it interesting that half of the prayer is about asking for help, and half of the prayer is reminding himself that God's always been there for him. Right? So I'm in big trouble. You've always helped me. I don't see any way that I could defeat Esau, but you've always been with me. So he's wrestling inwardly with the problem of Esau even before he gets to the place where he wrestles outwardly with the angel, and that's important. His name takes on even more importance because of it. When he is praising God for his prosperity, there's something kind of interesting that he says, or at least interesting to me. He says to God, you're the one that told me I should go home, right? So you brought me here, and now Esau's coming after me, so it's almost as if he's telling God, you owe it to me. You got me into this. You need to get me out. I'm not capable of dealing with my brother. That's why I went to Padan Aram in the first place. Now that I'm rich, and now that I've got all this, and you've blessed me so well, you told me that I should go back home. And now that I'm here, it seems like things are turning nasty in a hurry. So you told me to go back home. And again, he refers to the two camps. Did you notice the way that he referred to God? God, you are the God of Abraham, and you are the God of Isaac. You remember last week when we saw a different phrase. You're the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac. Here he uses the same term to refer both to his grandfather and to his father, both of their belief in God, just the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. Later on, Jesus will refer to them as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God will refer to his people when he's talking to Moses, tell them the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sent you. So he's about to be part of this understanding. Then we get to verse 13. Okay? Verse 13. He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels along with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, go ahead of me, keep some space between the herds. He instructed the one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you and asks you, who do you belong to? Where are you going? Who owns all these animals? Then you're to say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us. Who is the lord of that family? Jacob is. But that's not the way he introduces himself. Tell Esau, you are the Lord, I am the servant. And I'm giving you these gifts because I want to curry favor with the greater brother. It's not the way God planned it, not the way it's going to work out, but that's the way that he is trying to curry favor because he is terrified of his older brother. He also instructed the second, the third, and all the others who followed the herds. You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. Be sure that you say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. He thought, I will pacify him with these gifts that I'm sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. And that night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. So get the picture. You get everybody that's the closest to you. Okay? All the women who have mothered your children, all of the 11 boys. I do not know where Dinah was. Dinah's alive at this point, but don't know where she was. They take everybody, and all of his possessions means the close family stuff, right? What was in his tent, what was the closest thing to him. If you had a fire, what would you take out of the house with you? You know, he had his stuff and his wives and his concubines and his children, and they went to the Jabbok. The Jabbok is a tributary of the Jordan. So they're in that area close to the Jordan, and they're camped out next to a little tributary of it. One of the commentaries said that during rainy season, it is a flooded gorge of peril. It's just full of, it's a rapids and a place that you don't want to try to cross. So he gets everybody where he wants them, and then he stays by himself so that he can gather himself together, get up some courage, maybe spend some more time in prayer. But verse 24, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. How is this individual described? He is a man. Okay, he's a man. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Okay, so we've got a wrestling match that goes on for quite a while. One of the commentaries said we're not talking about 2 guys that said, hey, let's wrestle. We're talking about one attacking the other. And so this guy who's identified as the man comes and finds Jacob and attacks him, and they wrestle. Neither one can overcome the other. It's almost daybreak, and he suggests that maybe that was the end of the battle. Once you fought all night and it was almost daybreak, you had to stop the fight. And so the man touches the socket of Jacob's hip and puts his hip out of place. But he still won't give up. He still won't give in. He keeps fighting. He is unwilling to just yield and let the man go. So the man asked him, what's your name? Jacob, he answered. The man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. One of the most important verses in the Old Testament as far as the Jewish nation is concerned. Their identity is you have struggled with man and you have struggled with God and you have overcome. When did he struggle with God? It could be in his spiritual life, could be in his prayer life. Most commentaries think we're talking about this, that somehow this man that he wrestled with was a representation of God. So most people come up with the idea that he wrestled with an angel. Anywhere in the passage that you see the word angel? No. We don't get an angel. We get a man, and then we get a reference to wrestling with God. But we don't get an angel in this passage, or it's not stated that way. Why do we think there was an angel there? Well, a man doesn't have the right to give him the blessing. He doesn't have the right to change his name. Only God could do that. And we ran into a whole passel of angels, in the first verse of chapter 32. Right? There's big camps full of angels in the area. So most people take it that this individual with whom he wrestles is an angel. You've struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you want to know my name?" And he blessed him. We don't know particularly what the blessing was, just that he was blessed by this individual who had, in a sense, defeated him in battle because he threw his hip out, but it was basically a draw because Jacob never gave in and never gave up. So Jacob called the place Peniel. He said, "Because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." So in Jacob's mind, he saw God. In the Scripture, he wrestled with a man. And so people just kind of put those two together and say, well, a God man, a man who represented God, a messenger who was there on God's behalf and had the authority of God in the situation to give a blessing and to give a new name. So the sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. Now, we almost sound cannibalistic there for a minute, but that's not what they're talking about. Animals, that tendon that's there on the hip. And being a city boy as I am, I have never skinned out an animal. I wouldn't have any idea what that looks like up close and in person. But the Jews knew exactly when they were preparing something not to put that tendon in the meal, to take that and set it aside in honor of Jacob. But Jacob's name now isn't Jacob anymore, right? His name is Israel. But we're going to find as we go through Scripture that he is referred to more often as Jacob than Israel, even after his name is changed, even after he receives the blessing, even after he wrestles with God and man and overcomes. He's still referred to more often as Jacob. Jesus' baby brother that we call James was probably Jacob, named after him. There were lots and lots of Jewish boys that were born who were named Jacob in honor of Jacob. In fact, even in the modern era, there are lots and lots of folks who are named Jacob as an honor to the one who kind of becomes the father of the Jewish nation. Now, obviously, Abraham's the father of the faithful, but 12 tribes, the identity comes from Jacob, and the identity nationally comes from the name that the angel gave him after their wrestling match. There's something that I find in common with all of this passage, all of chapter 32. There are lots of messengers, right? You meet angels, the very first thing, and in the Greek, the word is ho angelos, and angelos means messengers. Right? So in Scripture, when you run into an angel, a lot of times they're carrying messages or they're representing God. And so an angel is a messenger. So you've got this big camp out of angels, lots of messengers. As soon as he gets to the area, Jacob sends messengers to Esau. They come back from Esau with a message. You got problems. He's coming, and he's got 400 guys with him. He gives messages to all the people. This is what we're going to do. He goes and he visits with God. He has a wrestling match with an angel, and he receives more messages. It's just a constant exchange of these messages, and there's lots of obstacles. He's trying to get to where God has told him to be, but maybe there's angels in the way. Maybe there's Esau in the way. Maybe there's circumstances in the way. So lots of messages, lots of obstacles to be overcome. But the entire passage, all of 32, the name is the thing. Right? We're not as interested in who those angels were. We're not as interested in the identity of the one with whom he wrestled all night. The thing is the name. Right? You will no longer be known as Jacob. Your name will be Israel. And because of that moment in time, when you look on the map of the Middle East, there's a place called Israel. There are Israelis, right? Because of that moment in time, that place in time. And some of them are so secular that Jacob doesn't mean a thing to them. But many of them still hold firmly to that idea that God, through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, gave them a name, an identity, and a place. That place that belongs to the descendants of Israel and those 12 tribes. Questions, thoughts? I knew you would. What do you got?
Did they all recognize the camps of angels? I mean, with the angels, did they look different than people? I mean, when we read about that, like they had all the camps of the angels there.
Okay. Again, I'll have to defer to some of the commentaries that I was reading. One said that it would have been obvious to them that this was an angelic group, that somehow they would know. Now, Jacob has already met some angels. Remember when he had the dream on the way to Padan Aram? The stairway, the ladder, whatever, going between heaven and earth, and he saw angels ascending and descending. So he's been in the presence of some angels before, and he recognizes that that's who they are. But now what kind of visual? This individual, anyway, thought that they looked like human beings. One of the things that happens in Genesis 6, when the sons of God take the daughters of men for their wives, they must have taken on some kind of human attributes. If you read the ancient Jewish stuff, which I've only read very little, the history, the legend of it is that they became very beautiful human males. And so the human women, wanted them more than they wanted the human males, because the angelic beings who had formed themselves to look like males were better looking and more desirable. That's one of the interpretations of Genesis 6. But evidently, in the long answer to your short question, I think they knew they were angels when they saw them. We don't know whether everybody else saw them. Right? Whether the whole clan saw that they were there, it doesn't say specifically. And again, the commentators disagree. Some say, absolutely, everybody must have seen them. And some others say, well, this was something for Jacob to know and not necessarily for everybody else. How do you miss them if there's a camp of them, or two camps of them, if they're surrounding you?
When you read through the Bible, one angel can come down and destroy 100,000 soldiers. So why did you need that many angels? Is another question I would wonder.
It is. Let me look at the reference. It's 2 Kings 6, when Elisha is in a city and his servant gets up and looks out of the city, and they're surrounded, and there's just thousands of the enemy. And so he comes back and he says, Elisha, we're done for, we're surrounded, there's nothing we can do. And Elisha prays on his behalf, and his eyes are opened, and then he can see all the angels of God surrounding the enemy. Maybe it was something like that if God needed you to see them, then you could see them, and if God didn't need you to see them, then it was as if they weren't there. I don't know. That's the answer to the question. I don't know.